So yesterday I got like a voice memo, because that's very cool, I guess, when you're
That's a thing now. It's the voice notes. It's like we can't be bothered to text. We must send the voice note via text.
I got a voice memo from my son Luke, and he was just telling me something, but just hearing his voice and hearing him walking down the street while he's telling me this thing, just basically telling me like a bill got paid or something. But it was just delightful. So that was my favorite text that I got.
And welcome back to the State of Business Texting podcast, where we are talking all things messaging.
I'm your host, Caitlin Long, the Senior Director of Product Management for Messaging here at Bandwidth.
And I am Zach Kunkel, Director of Solution Marketing.
Today, we're joined by one of my longtime friends in the industry, Gina Perini of Somos. Gina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be so fun to talk with you.
I know. This is always super exciting to get to talk to sort of industry leaders like yourself. But maybe just for the audience who are more unfamiliar with Somos and maybe yourself, can you tell a little bit more about your background in particular and just what role Somos plays in the industry?
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks, Caitlin. So I am the CEO and chair of the board at Somos. I got the amazing opportunity to really create Somos from its first moments as starting as a company that wanted to kind of reinvent toll-free and how toll-free numbers are administered, the kind of interesting things that are happening in toll-free. Got the chance to do that thanks to the FCC to take over. The first thing we did was the administration of toll-free numbers on behalf of the FCC. That has grown into also being the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, so therefore overseeing all the telephone numbers in the +1 area code. There are about 3 billion of them across the U.S., Canada, U.S. territories, and around 20 Caribbean countries. I don't know if everyone knows that. And that's the North American Numbering Plan, so we do that as well. We also provide something called a reassigned numbers database on behalf of the FCC, which we could always get into. We want to have some exciting conversation. But we do that, and we really care about phone numbers because of that. Because when we really think about it, phone numbers are the proxy for identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or digital identity, whether you're a person, you and I, or a brand. Those phone numbers play critical roles to be able to have your identity authenticated. And it's really, sometimes it's more valuable than your name for who you are and your identity. We also do that more globally. We have a wonderful subsidiary called XConnect that does number information services for over 200 countries, which essentially provides critical telephone number data to be able to optimize routing, to be able to mitigate fraud. So there's, especially in messaging, A2P is a big part of what they do for outside the US. So we play kind of interesting roles as we've grown, all centered around telephone numbers as critical identifiers and wanting to really do our part to increase trust in telecommunications.
I swear I passed high school geography, but I did not know 20 Caribbean countries. And
there
also,
are so many.
There are so many.
Yeah.
Does the job that you hold give you access to go travel to all those 20 plus countries?
No, and I am an idiot. No, no, I have not ever been to a Caribbean country on behalf of Somos, and I actually only ever been to one Caribbean country on my honeymoon.
Probably the same. Yeah.
So, maybe that should be on my list.
Maybe you can find a way to add that into the 2025 goals
I know.
You are
yourself.
The CEO. So
yes, exactly.
I know. Clearly, I need to think bigger in that capacity. Yeah.
No, Gina, appreciate all that context. Huge role that Somos plays, and probably for a lot of our listeners, one that they don't typically think about, or maybe this is the first time that they're hearing about the importance of, the administration of the phone numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And loved what you said about how it's almost like it is an identity.
Mm-hmm.
You think of your name, but also even more important, like sometimes the phone number. And so want to kind of get into the safe, secure area. Like, how is Somos actually helping create this safe and secure messaging ecosystem? Because that's what we're talking about here on the podcast.
Right. Absolutely. Well, there's so many components to this, right? I think you all see this, and I think those that are listening, the ecosystem is quite layered. There's lots of players. There's lots of information. When you have a call, message, multiple players might touch that in some capacity in the milliseconds that these things happen. And I think one of the things that we've recognized, and I think the industry has recognized, is there's lots of signals that happen along the way, or information that could be valuable to obviously the originating carrier, but all those that play along on that process to be able to validate identity or authenticate or get some kind of signal or data that could be helpful to figure out if something's fraud. And I think one of the things we've recognized is there is some interesting data out there, whether it's related to the telephone number or subscriber, not giving away personal information, but subscriber is something about the entity, where it's coming from, maybe signals about that. There's lots of different data out there. And I think one of the things that we've recognized is some of that data we have access to. So we have an opportunity to be able to share that data when it's valuable to those in the ecosystem that are service providers and or enterprises that are trying to protect their brands. And then there's also a role we try to play in collaboration, right? That's a big thing we talk about a lot in our industry, that we need to do it. Fraud and fighting fraud, building trust, right? They're two sides of the coin, is a team sport. So one of the things we're trying to do is understand ways to share what is the data? How do people understand what data is available? And if we can participate in helping, great. If not, let's connect people. But also creating some frameworks that are open and competitive that people can utilize and to be able to fight fraud. So what does that even mean? It means creating kind of frameworks. We have a trust framework we've been talking a lot about, which is open, that would involve open technologies and open concepts that will allow for more standardization in how people route traffic to be able to get the kind of data they need to authenticate it. That's the kind of role that we play to try to say, yes, one, there's data out there that could be very valuable to folks to get those kind of signals before the fraud happens, or to, if the fraud is happening, that we can share data about what's happening more broadly in the ecosystem. And two, creating some real thought leadership around what could frameworks be that could be helpful for the industry to use. And I think especially from a global standpoint, we all feel that each jurisdiction, each area does something different. And that can be really hard. And almost that creates a haven in some ways for fraudsters, because they know everything's it's hard for service providers to comply with all the different things in different regions. So how do we start creating more open standards that could be shared across regions that could help for us to have more consistency, ability for people to plug into those kind of frameworks and share data and get to the fraud before it gets to the people that get impacted by it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I know that you, on the voice side of the house for toll-free, right, were very involved in sort of the rollout of the Stir Shaken framework. And in the messaging space, we don't necessarily have a completely analogous framework to work around, right? But it's doing that same sort of concept. It's leaning into how can we, as an industry and an ecosystem, kind of co-collaborate across regions to figure out sort of almost like the attestation. I don't want to use a trigger word for those like knee deep in the the Stir Shaken world, but it's that same kind of thing. Actually, in the U.S., we have sort of a very unique setup with messaging where the number provider doesn't necessarily have to be the one that owns the messaging for that line of service, which is kind of a foreign concept when you go outside of the U.S. in particular. And so, which is why it's very interesting for the number, sort of the toll-free number specifically in the world of Somos, right, to maintain kind of the record of what has been happening on both the voice side and potentially the messaging side, which could be two completely different parties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do play a critical role there. And that was like early times. I don't know if you remember that, when the toll-free messaging was really kind of a Wild West, I think.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of really exciting things actually happening with toll-free messaging. But that bifurcation that you were talking about, not only between voice and messaging, but also who says, like, who's controlling that? Who gets to authorize that? And we played a role in creating that TSS registry, which is essentially with net number and making sure it's in the NNSR to make sure that, and that's a critical partnership, to make sure that at least at the level of the number, the authorizations are happening.
Right.
And then from there, enabling that to then flow into the ecosystem so that people know that that's been validated and we have the right checks in place. And RTU is obviously very important, that right to use component. And so again, that's we're not going to solve all the things, but these critical pieces solve part of the puzzle. And that RTU piece is critical, especially in the US where we saw a lot of that bifurcation, and we already see it and it exists going forward, to be able to at least connect those dots at the level of the ability to use. And then from there, adding other components to be able to safeguard the channel. Because I think the channel we all know also where are people going to go if the channel that exists isn't trusted, they're going to find other channels, both brands as well as consumers that they'll trust more, possibly.
Yeah, and especially where toll-free has such a cachet in certain markets, the markets that it does, right? And it makes a lot of sense to pay, in some cases, a premium for that, for both the voice and the messaging side. We certainly don't want to sort of degrade the trust there. And we've already started to see some of that. I mean, I think you and I and Zach, can attest as individual users, where a lot of times you'll see spoofed calls and sort of text messages now. It's starting to happen on toll-free as well. So all of that is necessary to kind of protect sort of the validity and integrity itself of the channel, which obviously we're all very invested in.
I think everyone listening to the podcast, you just referenced us three, but everyone listening has probably gotten a text today that is fraud, spam. I don't need to go check my package that I didn't order, or I haven't been on a tollway.
The tollway, those are my new favorite ones.
Yeah.
The tollway that I never drive on. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But Gina, you mentioned a few minutes ago how Somos and others are starting to collaborate and publish and think through these open frameworks to fight fraud, fight spam, and make this channel a trusted channel. What is the metric of success? Like, how do you guys approach that? Like, the end goal is what?
So the end goal is, you come in with an idea and it's going to change, right? It's going to evolve. You're going to get different viewpoints. So it's not necessarily feeling like the idea we bring to the table is the one that wins. We started a conversation and the end result was a framework was accepted. A region starts to use a particular concept. I was thinking about the work that I think a lot of us are doing at the MEF, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. I'm thinking about that. We were talking about this last week.
The question mark.
Yes. I guess there used to be the Mobile Entertainment Forum, and then they changed the ecosystem at some point, but that's the way I knew them too. And so we were thinking about the trusted messaging working group. That's a kind of a good example of bringing ideas to the table and now seeing sort of that, and that framework is going to have, has very clear kind of if you're going to have sender ID registries, campaign registries, right? We experience them. We have our version in the US and we have others that are wanting possibly to be popped up in other places. We don't need a different flavor in every place. So the thought was come in with a concept and see if we can create a framework that could be utilized by regulators or industry groups to be able to have some common consistency. So a success metric of that is we work through it. We find something that makes sense. We bring people's voices together and players that play key roles together. And then we go to the regulators and say, hey, here's something you could utilize instead of making it up from scratch. So a success factor would be a utilization of that either at an industry level where an industry group comes together and say, we're going to follow this guideline when we try to do this, or a regulator saying, hey, we agree. And I've talked to enough regulators to know they're actually asking for solutions. They don't want to make it up from scratch. They want to have something that could be utilized and be effective because they feel it on their side. They feel it from the consumer. They see the harm. It hits financially. So that would be a success metric, would be able to see those kinds of things starting to be utilized. You can't expect something to go fast in that capacity. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and just starting to really see that progress where like things like that are happening. Concepts like, the stir shaken thing is interesting as it relates to messaging, because yes, as it exists for the US, voice is one thing. But there's really, at the highest level, the core concept of that can absolutely be applied in messaging. And it's just really around the technology of the actual token,
right,
or how that works. And the data within the token is really very, very powerful. What could that look like? And everyone has some different ideas about it. And that's fantastic. But I think at the high, and that's what you want, but at the highest level, the success would be those core concepts being applied.
Yeah.
And I am not a stir shaken evangelist. I mean, I believe it works, in the ways that it works here. But when you open it up to the rest of the world, you have to think much bigger and much more open about what could work on a much more global scale. And I think it could be very powerful for messaging to have like the concept of those happen. So that's part of the success metric for us. And because we are stakeholder driven, because we don't have shareholders at Somos, it's a really interesting model. We were built and started as technically a nonprofit because we don't have stock and we don't have shareholders. That creates a lot of bootstraps growth, because you don't have big investors coming in. But what it has enabled us to do is keep stakeholders and these kinds of conversations. We can go in the long haul. We can invest in that to build the bridge, because we care about the trust of the channel and the trust behind phone numbers. So that's part of that.
I love the way you answered it. It makes me think, like, for any folks who have looked at the messaging ecosystem and thought, we even said it on this podcast, it can feel like the Wild West. Like, this is an area where, to use a political term, like bipartisan support would be here. Like, everyone's in it to rid the industry of this. And so appreciate how your answer is essentially like Somos and others are shoulder to shoulder thinking through in a very strategic and practical way. How can we make this the trusted channel that businesses and consumers alike want it to be? So
like the metric of a success is actually creating an agreed upon sort of definition and vocabulary on what success could be. Like that would almost be the first step. In my opinion, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's sort of what I got out of that.
Absolutely. And I think we have to come together around this, because the reality is the separation, the silos, the obstacles that exist within the industry that are very legitimate are the reason why the trust continues to get diluted, because it allows for a lack of communication. It allows for lack of sharing of data. And that just allows, I think I heard something really great when I was in a session last year where someone said, we have borders. We have, whether they're geographical borders, and then industry borders, and then within the industry, competitive borders. Fraudsters are borderless. And that really is like, it was a very powerful moment, because it made me realize, that is a really big part of it. And so creating those bridges as much as we can, finding ways to share data is going to be critical, because they don't have that same challenge. And then if you add the OTT on top of that, literally, there's closed networks that have none of those issues, right? They have, they can control that ecosystem. So I think it behooves us to do it. And I'm a very optimistic person by nature, but hope is not a strategy. So you have to make sure that you're really helping to say, yes, I don't want, again, we don't have to win here. It's not about our proprietary thing. It's about open. It's about how do we play across all of this as much as possible. And regulators have to play in that too, because we need help on the ability to share data. We need help sometimes to get people to want to play. Sometimes for various reasons, people won't participate unless they have to. So, we want to balance that out. And I think we all have a shared interest in it.
It's this a bit of the tragedy of the commons, right? So and that's actually where I think the messaging ecosystem forum, GSMA sort of standards, and also like entities like a Somos that sit in a more neutral position within the industry are helpful in sort of playing almost like the arbiter role and in sort of these discussions amongst friendly yet I would use the word frenemy type of individuals.
There's a lot of frenemies.
There's a lot of frenemies going on. Yeah.
Competition.
Yeah. To kind of help with that.
Right.
So in addition to this topic, so the fraud piece, which is it is a very large topic, and so your answer could be a subset of that, right? But if you were able to use this sort of soapbox moment to shine a light on a particular industry issue, challenge, maybe even a bright spot within the toll-free messaging space, what would it be?
So the bright spot that I love to see is that toll-free messaging is growing every year. Just in the last year, we've had a 10.5% growth in 1 year, year-over-year growth in the use of toll-free numbers for messaging. Enterprises love it. It's because it's a brand, they feel it's connected to their brand more closely. They feel the consumer sees it as more legitimate, a business, number. Remember for a while it was like, no, everything needs to be local. Maybe brands want to use local numbers, or they've definitely swung in the other direction. Demand of toll-free numbers has increased every year upon year. And every year people say, oh, it's going away, right? I've heard that since the beginning. And I actually didn't say one way or the other whether that was the case, because you need data over time to know whether that's happening. But I can say it continues to expand. Bandwidth plays a huge role in being that trusted provider of telephone number services. I mean, toll-free number services, especially. So it's continuing to increase. The brands are there. The demand is there. They want to use this channel. It's the preferred channel to do it. So right now we have over 8.5 million toll-free numbers text enabled, which is actually almost a quarter of them, or a little bit less than that. So it's like, and every day it's growing more and more. So I think it's really the bright spot is the demand is there. The brands want to use it. They see toll-free numbers as a critical channel. And it used to be, which channel, omni-channel. Yes, it's all the channels. They want to be they know that you want to reach the consumer. And we do talk a lot to enterprises because they care a lot about the inventory of their numbers and the brand that's connected to it. And I think they're getting increasingly more involved in that, or wanting to be. And they see the value in them. I guess the call to action is let's want them to stay there, right? Mm-hmm. Because I guess, and then you say, why do I care? The numbers are the numbers. But I guess to a certain point, it's sort of caring about the telecoms channels in general and the amazing innovation that can happen, the user experience of that. I still have this, we have so much technology. This is like amazing, right? Every year it gets more. I'm holding my phone, right, and thinking about all that we can do here and all the ways that a consumer can truly have an experience. And that's where like rich business messaging comes in, and all the experience that people can have through this device, and the channel is just right for it. So I guess to me, the bright spot is the demand is there, the consumer is still there. And I think part of that is just how do we this is our opportunity. So it's sort of a bright spot with a call to action, and us really committed as, again, that neutral player to say, we can invest time into how that can work and try to build bridges. Again, not only where we can help directly, but where we can help connect others in the ecosystem, because we have kind of a unique role and we want to utilize it for the good of that sort of increasing trust.
Yeah. Well said. Hear, hear.
So Gina, that's a little bit of, if you could shine a spotlight, it's essentially the growth and the demand still being there. It's kind of like a look back view. As you look forward, we're already in Q1, Q2 of 2025. Maybe you're already on to 2026. As you said, Somos can play the long game, which is a great quote. What are you most looking forward to this year, or maybe it's next year? Like, what makes you excited about maybe something you're personally working on or Somos is knee deep in?
Okay, there's two pieces to that the question that comes to mind and how I think about that. One, I think we're all just waiting with bated breath for RBM to really come because I think we
telling
want
me about it.
Do you dream about it, Caitlin?
Yeah. Setting up SKUs, doing all the things.
Yeah. I know when I start dreaming about something with work, I'm like, okay, I think I need a break, but I'm sure, yeah, sure you're doing that. So I think we all see the amazing potential that we actually don't play that close with that. I mean, I think we see it as another way for us to unlock the channel for consumers, for brands, so that, and I think it could enable a great amount of trust. And I think Google's done an amazing job of kind of like really thinking about how to implement that and put that together. And I think the industry wants it so badly. I think we want to figure out ways to play roles to help with that in any way. So that's really more of my personal excitement around what that could look like. And again, unlocking the technology that we have, right, available, and that experience, right? Like you just feel like, it's not sci-fi to expect like a very cool experience where people can know who they're engaged with, feel they can trust it at its like number one, right? And two, actually get like these great benefits of like clicking and buttons and like helping me understand what I need to do without having it be onerous. All those things would be great. I think that's something that we are all sort of thinking about. How do we help that accelerate and happen? Another piece that I think I'm pretty excited about too is sort of the data around phone numbers is so important, but what's happening with MNO APIs, right? Where there's other parts of data and signals that are out there related to originating, terminating phone numbers and information, as well as other information that you get from MNOs. I think the opening up of that piece of the industry has been slow, but I definitely think it's reaching a place where, again, what's the data that needed to be able to get the right signals so that the fraud doesn't happen, so you get ahead of it, and the sharing of that data. So we've been thinking a lot about that. It's not just about telephone numbers. It's about lots of other data that's critical, that could be helpful. And the fact that that piece of the ecosystem is starting to open up more is something that I'm also very excited about, because I think it's going to be really helpful, right? It's not just one data thing. It's multiple data points, and it's feedback loops and other things that will allow for fraud, which tends to, when you look back, you can kind of see where those flags might have existed. If you can start building that data and sharing that data, I think it would be very valuable. So those are two things I'm thinking about as we're looking into the future.
Yeah. And those are exciting prospects. And I think, as you said, the fraudsters earlier are sort of borderless. And so simultaneously, one of the promising things I've actually seen with some of the new rich messaging capabilities in the launches is that we're, prior to even having the channel live in the US, right? Like the P2P version of RCS is available, but the A2P version has not fully launched yet. We're already having the conversations. We were having the conversations in detail a year ago to talk about sort of what the measures could look like that we could continue to share data amongst ourselves so that we're actually getting ahead of it, knowing how this pattern goes when we're sort of launching a new channel and we wind up running and catching up. We're trying to sort of sprint forward. So got the positive mindset on there. One question we do like to ask everybody, and I don't want to let the podcast go by without asking you, is what is your favorite text message that you've received? So it could be today, could be in the last month, week, year, just from anybody, from any business person, just favorite text message.
Yes. Well, I'm a mom of two young 20-somethings. So any text I get from them. So I got
that feels like an oxymoron. Young 20-somethings.
They're young 20-somethings. I'm not young. Yeah. So 20 and 22. And anytime I get a text from them, especially with a picture. And so yesterday I got like a voice memo, because that's very cool, I guess, when you're
That's a thing now. It's the voice notes. It's like we can't be bothered to text. We must send the voice note via text.
So I got a voice memo from my son Luke, and he was just telling me something, but just hearing his voice and hearing him walking down the street while he's telling me this thing, just basically telling me like a bill got paid or something. But it was just delightful. So that was my favorite text that I got.
We're going to have a scoreboard, because the friends and family text messages, man, they're coming out strong on this podcast, Zach. Yeah. It's the last few that we've had. It's hard to beat the friends and family podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think isn't that the beauty of connection?
It is.
Right? That's why the channels need to be trusted. Like, that's why, right? It's the connection, not just between, great, I got that product I want, which believe me, I love that stuff too. But it's the connection with the people you love and the communities you care about. So it really is. And I would be a little sad for myself if I told you it was a business mistake. I need to reassess myself if that was my
I know it's been
response.
controversial, but we are pro friends and family on this podcast. Okay.
It's not controversial.
That's the joke, Caitlin. That's the joke.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. It's definitely on brand for bandwidth. I think that would be very appropriate.
Well, this has been awesome, Gina. I appreciate it. The lighthearted humor and the in-depth detail, illuminating a whole bunch of great conversation. If listeners would like to connect with you or maybe learn more about your work, like where can people find you online? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best. I try to post a lot. I try to put in, videos and concepts. I always check my messages on there, so feel free to do that. That's the best place to reach me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again so much for your very valuable time, for joining us.
Of course.
Thanks also, of course, to all of our listeners tuning in. Just a reminder for those joining us that you can catch all of our current past episodes and subscribe to new episodes wherever you get your podcasts, including new for this season, the video of our lovely faces on YouTube as well.
And if you haven't yet, go to stateofmessaging.com to download your free copy of the latest State of Messaging report.
That's also where you can find information about this year's Textie Awards for excellence in messaging. And of course, information about Bandwidth's messaging APIs.
All right, that's it. Thanks so much, Gina. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks
and we will catch
me.
you guys next time.
Till next time. See y'all.